Hello everyone, greetings to one and all. In today's session, we are going to cover an interesting topic, significance of case and if statements. Both this case and if statements plays a vital role in a developer's programming lifecycle. The application of case and if statements has a specific similarity and a difference as well. Knowing the importance of these two statements and where to use it, when to use it, plays a vital role for a developer. In today's session, I'm going to discuss between the key differences between the case and if statements based upon these three topics. Like the selection between the radio buttons is going to be one example where I'll explain both. And I'm going to explain you the case inside a case statement, just like how an if inside an if statement can be used. And the suitability for logical operations out of these two, which is going to be your best shot. So we'll directly jump into the demo part. I have written one simple program. So this program, in short, deals with 7 radio buttons, and I'm processing all these 7 radio buttons through a subroutine, wherein I have written the code for both case and if statements, so that you can understand the logic accordingly. Okay. Now I have placed a breakpoint here. Now I'm going to execute this. I'm choosing the first radio button here, and let me execute. Now if you watch carefully regarding the case and if statements, the first time I'm going to check using the case statement, I'm going to check which radio button is checked. I'm going to use the F5 option here so that you understand this program step by step. If you are not familiar with the debugging process, or if you're not familiar with the F5, F6, F7 keys, I request you to go through my debugging series. I request you to go through the videos of the debugging series, which has all the details about debugging tool and other features. Let's come back here. I'm going to press F5, or I'm going to use this icon in the selections in the screen as you see. So the challenge here using the case statement is I'm going to find out which radio button is selected. So the case is X. So it is going into the first option, and it is writing this particular statement, and it is coming out of the case statement. Now here in the if statement, similarly, it is checking the first option, and it is writing that this particular radio button is selected, and it is moving out. Now let me complete the execution. So it's like radio button 1 is selected using case options, and radio button 1 is selected using if option, just to show you the differentiation between both the methods here. Now let me select radio button 3. Okay, and I'll execute the same case. If you see here, the case is now checking for radio button whichever is selected. So as soon as I execute the case statement, it directly goes to radio button 3 option. Okay, now whereas when you check with the if option, it first checks if radio button 1 is selected, next it checks radio button 2 is selected, and next it checks radio button 3 is selected, and then it is writing the necessary statement because it got successfully validated at that step, and it is executing. Now both the options gets the content that's written via both the options is going to get displayed. Now things may be more clear now when I select the last radio button. Now I execute it. You see in the case statement, the logical operation or the logical validation of which radio button is selected is found out in a single step. From line number 9, the program control directly goes to 22 because it knows none of these radio buttons are selected, and it is directly reaching out to radio button 7, and it is executing the corresponding lines of code. I have written a simple write statement here just to show you the simplified logics. The purpose here is to let you know understand between the difference between the case and if statements. So I didn't write any complex statements in between the cases and the if statements. I've written a simple write statement. So coming back, as you saw now, the case statements directly help this in reaching out to the necessary selected option. But see what happens to the if statement. It goes through each else if statements until the necessary condition is reached, and it executes the successful scenario only after it is satisfied. Like in this case, as you have just seen, if I chose the first radio button, there is not much difference between a case and if statement. When I chose the third radio button, there is slight difference, right? My if condition has to pass through two validations and then reach to the successful validation and execute, whereas my case statement directly reached out to the successful validation and it got executed. When I chose the seventh radio button, my case statement still got executed in a single step by reaching out to the successful validation, whereas my if else statement has to pass through all the validation, else if all the else if conditions, and finally when it reached out the exact successful validation, which is the seventh step, it executed the logic written underneath. So whenever the requirement is to find out a statement like this, like which radio button got selected, or to find out an binary indicator like case the value is say 1 2 3 4. If there are different variables that can hold different values, you can always go for case statements. When I say different values, now for example, consider this case. Okay, now I have like if okay, in short I'll write a simple scenario. Here we have selected radio button. Now consider there is a particular case where case, okay, the value is 1. Okay, and this value can be held by multiple variables, right? gv underscore num1, gv underscore num2. So I have written declared these two variables above, so I'm writing it. So you can use the case statements in this case as well, wherein your comparison is always singular. Like you are just checking for a value on a particular set of variables. You can use for case statements than using for if else statements because it is more productive and efficient. But I'll comment this code for now. But when do you go for if else statement in that case? If else statements are useful for these kind of logical operations. Okay, if you see here, these are all the logical operations that we are checking. When variable 1 is greater than variable 2 is greater than variable 1, the sum of variable 1 and 2 is greater than variable 2. If variable 1 and 2 are initial, or variable 1 and 2 are using AND operator I'm checking, using OR operator I'm checking. So when this logical expressions can always be checked via if else condition. This cannot be done in a case statement. Now for example, if you see here, as soon as I try to write this case statements with the logical operators, they will throw an error. You see this indicator as a red line, which means that it is syntax wise it is not correct. When I perform a syntax check, it's gonna throw an error. Now when I try to activate it, the error will be more relevant. See, it is not able to interpret in case of case statements. Okay, this is the line I was talking about, line number 75. So the logical operations is not possible in a case statement, and that's why we prefer if else condition statements. Whereas if there are a situation wherein you have to find out the value of a particular number, or if you are trying to validate a particular value on a multiple set of variables, you can go for case statements, just like how I showed you here. Okay, now here I've showed you one example using the radio button selection, and I've also shown you one example using a value selection like this. If I want to check the value in a multiple set of variables, I can use case statements. Okay, so there is another possibility, just like how you can write an if condition inside a if condition, you can also write a case statement inside a case statement like this. Okay, so it's all purely depends upon your business requirement and your business scenario. And as a developer, your analytical skill matters a lot, where to use which options. So in short, as far as this particular condition is subjective to this particular condition, whenever you want to validate a certain value against a set of variables like this, where I'm validating ABAP underscore true against all these radio buttons, or like this, where I have to validate this value 1 against this set of variables, it's better to go for case statements because your execution lines is comparatively lesser when compared to the if else part, wherein the if else part has to go through all the iterations until the successful condition is met. Whereas in case statements, it finds out the successful statement, or it finds out the successful condition in a single step. But when it comes to logical operations, it's always better to go to if else part because they have the facility to facilitate the logical operations. You can use the logical and or and also arithmetic operations in a if conditions, and you can perform the required logic. So knowing the significance because between this case and if statements is very vital in your programming life cycle. and it can help you with an efficient programming, code lines, and efficient performance of the program that you write. So in today's session, we have covered these two topics. The selection between radio buttons, we understood the case and if statements. And we also understood just like if inside an if statement, you can also write case inside a case statement. And the suitability for logical operations is always if statement because in case, you cannot have them. So I hope the demo gave you a clear understanding about the significance of both if and case statements. Happy coding. In the next session, we will cover more key technical concepts. Thank you. Peace and blessings to everyone.